I heard him. I wasn't supposed to, but I did. That voice, low, sharp, whispering into me like a dagger slowly slicing through silence. You should have died, Elena. Each word dropped like lead into the stillness between breaths. At least then I wouldn't have to take responsibility. I couldn't move. I couldn't open my eyes. But in that moment, I felt everything. The hatred behind each syllable, the contempt in that voice, as if my existence was the last burden he had to carry. I wanted to scream, to cry, to ask why. But my body wouldn't respond. They say a coma is like deep, dreamless sleep. They lie. The truth is far more brutal. You drift in a void of darkness and echoes, trapped inside your own body. Voiceless, powerless, left only with thoughts and fragments of the outside world that somehow reach you. For me, that world came in flickers, the soft hum of machines, the quiet creak of a door, the distant sobs of someone crying. And then came his voice. Grayson's. My husband. I still don't know what brought me here. One moment, we were driving to a board meeting, running late, exhausted, our minds spinning with quarterly figures. The next, everything went black. The doctors told my parents it was a brain injury from a collision. A car ran a red light. I didn't see it. I don't remember the impact, but I remember waking up in the dark, unable to move, no longer recognizing this body as mine. What I didn't expect, Grayson was the one behind the wheel. But when the crash happened, he told the doctors and the police that I had been driving, that I lost control, that it was all my fault. In the early days, the only sounds were the steady beeping of the monitors, footsteps, and then my mother's voice, trembling, filled with both hope and fear. Elena, sweetheart, if you can hear me, I'm here. I love you. Please come back to us. I wanted to run to her, to grab her hand, to scream that I hadn't gone anywhere. But I could only scream inside my head, in that invisible space where I was trapped. Then Grayson came. I recognized the scent of his cologne before I heard his footsteps. A scent of power, carefully curated, like everything else in his life. He greeted the doctor with perfect politeness, thanked the nurses, then sat beside me, stroking my head gently as if the cameras were rolling. You're strong, he whispered. You'll pull through. That day, I cried. Not because I believed him, but because for one fleeting moment, I thought he still loved me. I was wrong. By the third week, I started to sense something wasn't right. Grayson's visits grew shorter, his touch colder, and when no one else was around, he began to speak to me, not to comfort, but to vent. And what he said changed everything. Your company. Why would you put your sister in charge? If you actually die, what do I even get? There was no love left in his voice. Only frustration, irritation. You didn't leave the password. You didn't leave a contingency plan. I used to trust Grayson. I thought we were building everything together. The company, the careers, the life. I brought him into my world when all he had was ambition and a silver tongue. And now, trapped in this paralyzed shell of a body, he sat beside me, counting the days until he could inherit everything I built. The worst part? I couldn't warn anyone. I couldn't tell my parents. Couldn't blink. Couldn't do anything. Dr. Harris, the neurotherapist, visited regularly. His voice was gentle, steady, filled with patience. He spoke to my parents about neural responses and sensory stimulation. I once heard him say that patients like me might still be able to hear, even if they couldn't respond. My mother clung to that hope like a lifeline. My father, quieter, just stood there, gripping my hand tightly. I wanted to squeeze his hand back just once, but I couldn't. Grayson still came, still played the role of the devoted husband, the bouquets, the rehearsed sighs. But every time the room emptied, his mask would slip. And bit by bit, everything I thought I knew about him unraveled. I used to think betrayal was like a sharp knife to the back. But it's not. Sometimes it's slow, silent. And where's your wedding ring? He thought I couldn't hear. That I would never remember. But I did. I heard every word, every whispered sentence. And one day I will make him regret saying them. Grayson never missed a visit. Not because he loved me, but because appearances meant more to him than anything. Every week he brought white roses, always white, always pure. He walked through the hospital lobby with that perfectly sorrowful expression, nodded at the nurses, offered soft smiles when someone said they were sorry. To the world, he was the husband who never gave up. To me, he was the stranger I once loved. He sat beside my bed, holding a novel I never even liked, reading aloud in a flat, hollow tone, as if he was just going through the motions, filling the silence, or putting on a show in case someone walked by. He no longer held my hand. He just rested his fingers lightly on my wrist, just enough to look like a tender gesture if a nurse happened to enter. I hated that feeling, the sensation of still being able to feel his skin, yet utterly unable to move, to push him away. I hated having to listen to his whispered words and not being able to scream and make him stop. "I can't keep doing this, Elena," he muttered once, as if talking to himself. "I didn't marry you to babysit a corpse." I remember the exact day I realized what he truly wanted. He arrived late, shirt wrinkled, reeking of alcohol and cheap perfume. That day, there were no flowers, no greetings for the nurses. Just a tired, bitter Grayson, walking in like he was attending a funeral. He leaned close to my face and whispered, "Do you have any idea how much this place costs per day? This isn't love, Elena. This is debt." I wished I could vanish into the bedsheets, dissolve into the air, into the machines, anything, just to not hear him anymore. But I couldn't. His voice clung to me like a sentence I couldn't escape. Every word he spoke to my parents was scripted. Every glance, every tilt of his head was rehearsed, like he was preparing for an interview. "She's a fighter," he told my mother, adding a sorrowful head tilt that I was certain he'd practiced in the mirror. "I believe she'll wake up." But when it was just the two of us, his voice turned bitter, harsh. "You should have let me access the accounts. You think I can't run things without you? I don't know what's worse, the greed or the entitlement with which he acted like he deserved everything. Grayson didn't love me. He wanted to take what I'd built, to inherit everything I'd poured my sweat into. He never saw me as a partner. When we first met, I mistook ambition for passion, and the way he paid attention to me as love. He once said, "You make me a better man, Elena. You see the real me." The turning point came when he let slip a comparison between me and another woman, his mistress, his voice dripping with contempt. "She knows how to do things right. Not like you, Elena." That's when I understood. I was just a rung on the ladder he used to climb. And now that he'd climbed high enough, he looked down at me as if I were the obstacle keeping him from going further. At night, when the hospital hallways were bathed in dim yellow light and the only sounds were the distant footsteps of nurses, I felt everything more clearly. The steady beep of the heart monitor, the ticking of the clock, each second pressing down like a reminder of my captivity, and my own breathing, slow, shallow, but still there. I was still here, even though he wished, day after day, that I would disappear. I was still alive, and that was the one thing he couldn't control. One afternoon, I felt the warmth of my mother's hand placed gently over mine. She whispered, soft, hopeful. The kind of hope I used to find annoying, but now clung to like air. We haven't given up, sweetheart. Grayson. He's doing everything he can. We all are. I wanted to scream. No, Mom. He's not doing anything. He never has. But all I could do was lie there, helpless, as my mother placed her trust in the wrong person, in the man who had planned for the day I would never wake up. Dr. Harris still checked on me every day. He spoke gently, with respect, even when no one else was around. He never rushed, never looked at me like I was just an object in the room. I knew he believed in something real, something deeply human. When he told my parents, patients like Elena may still be aware. Talking to her is important. I felt an invisible thread tighten around me. He was trying, and so was I, even if my body refused to show it. But Grayson, he was growing more impatient by the day. He didn't want hope. He wanted closure. And the longer I stayed alive, the more I became a burden to him. I started to fear what he might do next. Not just for myself, but for my parents. For everything I had ever tried to build. For everything I was still clinging to in this darkness. Then one night, everything changed. I heard a different sound, a voice I didn't recognize. Software gentle, unbelievably male. Hey, Elena, mind if I sit with you for a bit? I didn't recognize the voice. Not a doctor, not a nurse, not any family member. It was a man, but his voice carried a kind of peace. Warm, real, no pressure, no pity. I know they say you're asleep, but I think maybe you're just waiting for the right person to talk to. Maybe that's me. I didn't know who he was, but his voice reached places Grayson's never could. And in that moment, I didn't feel so alone anymore. He came back the next night. I wasn't sure how I knew it was him. Maybe it was his footsteps, the stillness he brought with him. Or maybe just the subtle relief in the air every time he was near. It's me again, he whispered, as if he were doing something forbidden. I held on to that voice in my mind like a drowning person clinging to their final breath. Not a doctor's voice, not a rehearsed voice pretending to care. It was real, unpolished. I brought you a gift, he said softly. Then I felt something small and solid, gently placed in my hand. It's a music box, he said. It helped me get through fear when I was little. I hope it helps you too. I wanted to cry. I wanted to hold his hand, wrap my arms around him, whisper thank you. But all I could do was listen to the tiny gears turning, letting out delicate notes into the quiet of a hospital room swallowed in night. He came back every night, as if it were a secret mission he'd taken on himself. Sometimes he sat quietly on the floor, leaning against my bed, humming softly. Sometimes he told me little stories from around the hospital. How a nurse dropped a tray of pudding. How the boy in the room next door kept demanding to play music all night. And then he said, "You used to bully me when we were little. Do you remember?" I was stunned inside my own mind. But when the other kids bullied you, I was the first one to stand up for you. His voice carried no resentment, no blame, just memory, a real one. And I began to realize that he was Noah, the Noah from back then, the Noah I had forgotten. He didn't let me be alone, not a single night. "I'll be back tomorrow." He always ended that way. And gradually, his stories became my shelter. I replayed every word he said in my head like a lullaby. They filled the hollow space Grayson had left behind, a space no amount of pretense could ever repair. Noah didn't look at me like I was broken. He didn't need me to be anyone, to have had anything, or to become something. He just needed me to know that I still had worth. One night, he whispered something I never expected. You may be someone's wife, Elena, but to me, just knowing that, to me, you're always little Elena. I felt my heart stir. In the stillness, in the quiet shadow of death, something inside me began to shift. A heartbeat, a possibility. And then he whispered, You were my first love, and you'll be my last, if you let me. I didn't dare believe it, didn't dare hope, but I wanted to, and that want alone was enough to make me want to come back. Noah still came, even as the nurses started noticing his nightly disappearances. No one stopped him. Maybe someone knew and chose not to interfere. Maybe it was Dr. Harris. Or maybe it was fate quietly opening a door, letting him slip in at the exact moment I needed him most. Whatever the reason, he kept coming, and I was grateful for it. He was there, every night, telling stories, singing, talking about a world I had almost forgotten. One night, he leaned close to my ear and whispered, Last night your finger moved. When I told you the story about the clumsy nurse dropping pudding, I saw it. I didn't remember. But somewhere, deep in my subconscious, my hand had twitched. A reflex? Or an unconscious effort to come back? Dr. Harris noticed too. His voice was different that day, no longer clinical, but filled with hope. She responded. It was very slight, but it was real. And that is a beginning. My mother cried again. She cried again, but this time, her tears were softer. Tears carrying something that felt like joy. I began to feel the shift. Not in my body, but in the rhythm of the room. The nurses spoke to me more gently. Noah's storytelling grew more cheerful. And deep down, I no longer believed I was lost forever. Grayson, on the other hand, changed. He started coming less often. Maybe he sensed it, that I was going to wake up. And that terrified him more than death itself. One day, Grayson walked in with no flowers, no carefully polished expression. None of the rehearsed tenderness meant to look like love. He didn't greet the nurses, didn't spare a glance at my parents. He just waited for the room to clear, then leaned in close to my ear and spoke with a voice that dripped poison. You think you're winning, Elena? A scoff, choked in his throat, full of contempt. You're lying here, motionless, a useless burden. I know you can't hear me, but I'm done. I'm not spending the rest of my life imprisoned in this hospital while you rot. You should die, and the accident should be buried with you. That was the first time I wished I could scream, not out of fear, but because Noah was in the bathroom. I'd heard the door handle turn, the soft footsteps, and then silence. He heard everything, and so did I. That moment was no longer just a secret. It was a crack in the wall Grayson had built around himself. This time, he wasn't alone in his cruelty. Grayson froze. He didn't know Noah was there. Didn't expect there to be a witness, not today. The air turned still. I could feel Grayson's breathing grow faster, and then Noah's voice, low, calm, but piercingly clear. What did you just say? Noah stepped closer to my bed, his eyes never leaving Grayson. Did you just say she should die? Is that what I heard? No response. Just the awkward tension sliding over Grayson's face, like a mask beginning to crack. Noah's fist clenched. You wanted her dead so you could be free. You're planning something, aren't you? Noah didn't shout, but his voice sliced through the air like a blade. Then he turned and walked quickly toward the door, his voice ringing out louder than any alarm. "Doctor, this is an emergency. Call the police. Now!" After that, everything broke loose. Like a dam bursting, nurses panicked. My mother burst into tears. My father was so furious he couldn't speak. Dr. Harris was the only one who stayed calm. And Noah, he stood there, pointing at the small music box, resting neatly on the table beside my bed. That box has a recorder in it. I left it there after noticing Grayson behaving suspiciously. A nurse opened the box and played the recording. And then, that voice echoed through the room, cold, shameless, sharp as a blade. "I'm not spending the rest of my life in prison in this hospital while you rot. You should die." My mother let out a sob. My father muttered a curse under his breath. Dr. Harris looked at Grayson as if, at last, he was seeing the man's true nature. "A line has been crossed. It's time to act." The police were called. Grayson was escorted out in handcuffs, still trying to blabber. "I was just talking. She's in a coma. I didn't do anything. You can't arrest me for saying something offhand." But Noah just stood there, steady, unmoved. And Dr. Harris replied with a single quiet statement. "You didn't just talk. You planned. And the only reason she's still alive is because someone heard you." With the recording, Noah's testimony, and my entire family present, the police needed nothing more. They tightened the cuffs. And for the first time since I fell into that terrifying darkness, I felt safe. A few days later, when I finally opened my eyes after what felt like an eternity of silence, the room was still. The air was warm. Soft light brushed against my eyelids like a gentle embrace. And beside me, seated in the chair next to the bed, was Noah. He looked up, eyes wide and slightly misty, and whispered as if afraid to shatter a miracle. "You came back." I couldn't speak yet. My throat was dry. My lips cracked. But I smiled. And when he took my hand, I squeezed back. Not much. Just a tiny curl of my pinky finger. But it was enough to ignite a quiet spark of hope that spread through the room like dawn. The next day, I could blink on command. Then a nod. A breath. A sound. Tiny movements, seemingly meaningless. And yet, they meant everything. Noah froze, then laughed. He rested his head beside my pillow and whispered, "I knew it. I always knew you were still in there somewhere." I closed my eyes. Not out of fear or despair like before, but because this time I wasn't alone anymore. I had come back. The days that followed were a blur of pain and tenderness. It felt like sound returned in thin layers, and light touched my eyes like needles. Too bright, too vivid. My body felt foreign, like I had been placed into someone else's skin without an instruction manual. But Noah never left my side. He told the same stories again and again, some of them 3 times. But I never once asked him to stop. His voice was like sunlight, warming frozen skin. Even when I drifted off from exhaustion, I always knew he was still there, softly singing or whispering to me. Dr. Harris stood by my bedside one morning, looking over the monitor readings with an expression that balanced science and something deeper. "You're one stubborn woman," he said, smiling. Truly smiling for the first time. Not just the professional kind. I blinked in response. He understood. And Noah. Noah squeezed my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Do you remember me?" His voice hesitated for a moment. My heart tightened in the best possible way. I didn't cry much anymore. I was too exhausted. But in that moment, I felt a burning behind my eyes. I tried to nod, just a slight tilt of my head, but it was enough to make his whole face light up, like he'd just rediscovered himself. That night, when the hallway was quiet, the lights dim and the only sound was the soft rhythm of the ventilator, I whispered my first words in weeks. "You saved me." The sound was rough, barely audible, but he heard it. His handsome face froze, then broke into a smile full of relief. "I knew you were still as strong as that little girl from back then. I knew you were still here." Dr. Harris stepped in right after. He noticed how I responded more to Noah than to anyone else. He didn't ask questions. He simply placed a gentle hand on my shoulder and said, "Looks like the two of you found each other." And we had. But it wasn't until a week later, when I was strong enough to sit up for more than 5 minutes, that I truly began to feel the weight of it all. Grayson had been arrested. There would be lawsuits. The media would descend without mercy. My accounts were frozen, and the board had appointed my sister as interim CEO. Grayson's name had never appeared on any official documents. He thought marrying me made him a partner. The court disagreed. And now I would have to rebuild from the ground up my name, my reputation, my future. But none of that scared me anymore. What truly scared me was the thought that if Noah hadn't been there, if his hand hadn't held mine through all those long nights, I might never have come back. He didn't save me with a medical miracle. He saved me with presence, with belief, with a kind of love that never asked for anything in return. A man, a friend, now a companion. I didn't think I could ever trust another man again. But with Noah, I didn't have to pretend to be strong. He didn't need me to be the capable Elena I used to be. He just needed me, here, now. Or maybe the little Elena he had always tried to protect. We didn't rush anything. We became friends. We shared quiet mornings over coffee, an afternoon spent in silence without feeling the need to fill it. A year later, I moved in with Noah. We didn't call it a family, but in my heart, that's exactly what it was. A chosen home, a new life that didn't need to be flashy, a place where I no longer had to fight to be seen, to be heard, to be loved. We didn't have much, just a small apartment, a bed we would share for a while, and a music box that still held the old recording, a reminder of how far we'd come. But every morning I woke up knowing I was still here, that I had Noah, and that he had me. Noah was there through every tiny step back into life. He came with me to my first physical therapy session, where I lost balance and nearly fell off the support bar. I laughed in embarrassment, but he didn't laugh. He just gently caught my hand and held me steady. He was also the one who helped me face the panic attacks when car horns or machine sounds accidentally triggered old fear. He never saw me as someone who needed saving. And one evening, after we'd both fallen asleep on the sofa, Noah turned toward me, not just looking with his eyes, but with his whole heart. "You woke up for me," he said softly, "but you also saved mine." I nodded, tears shimmering at the corners of my eyes. Noah had reminded me how to live again. He squeezed my hand and whispered, "You don't have to do this alone, anymore." It wasn't a proposal. It wasn't a promise. It was an invitation. And I nodded without saying a word. That night, I realized, some wounds are unreachable by pain. Like love, if it's real. Love isn't always grand or loud. Sometimes it walks into your life in the quiet footsteps of someone carrying a box of takeout. Sometimes it waits for you in a hospital hallway with gentle eyes and a simple question. "Are you okay?" And sometimes it's just there, patient, steady, waiting for you to be strong enough to open your heart again. I was ready. 2 years later, my little home isn't quiet the way it used to be. Not chaotic, just full of life. The sound of a baby crying from the next room, the soft crackle of oil in a pan, music playing faintly from the radio, and Noah humming a tune I don't recognize, but somehow love deeply. Those sounds fill every corner I used to be trapped in silence, in loneliness. I never thought I could go from half living in a hospital bed to standing barefoot in my own kitchen, a baby on my hip, and Noah rinsing vegetables in the sink of our kitchen. Noah has become a father, a partner, a fierce protector. He loves me, and our child, as if that love had always been there. He reads bedtime stories, sings lullabies he makes up on the spot. And sometimes, when he thinks no one's listening, he whispers to the baby, "You're so lucky, you know? We got a second chance." And he's right. We did. There are still hard days. I'd be lying if I said the past never crept in. Through a smell, a sound, a memory that arrives uninvited. But the difference now is, I no longer face them alone. Noah isn't just the man who stood beside me in that sterile hospital room. He's the one who stayed when the spotlight faded. The one who changes diapers at 3 a.m. Who learns to braid our daughter's hair without a single complaint. He didn't try to fill the void Grayson left. He never had to. He helped me build something entirely new. One afternoon, while cleaning out a cabinet, I found the small music box, the one that sat on the table beside my hospital bed throughout my coma. The wood had dulled with time, but the recording button still worked. I hadn't listened to that recording since the trial. Back then, it was evidence. Now it's sealed away, not to relive the pain, but to remember how far we've come. I had once been a witness to my own story, from being abandoned to surviving. I placed the music box back on the shelf, not as a reminder of the wounds, but as a tribute to the strength that emerged when I thought I had nothing left. I don't need to hear his words again. I only need to remember that I survived, and that I live differently now. I'm no longer afraid of the dark. And now, it's part of his story. And mine too. People often ask, how did you make it through? How did you come back after everything you lost? My answer is always the same. Because someone stayed. Not the strongest person. Not the wealthiest. Not the most powerful. Just someone with a love that asked for nothing and gave everything. A music box. A doctor who never gave up. And a man who showed up when I thought I had lost myself forever. I'm not the woman I was before the accident. I don't run a company. I don't stand on stages. I don't fly first class to give presentations in glass towers. But I wake up every day to the sound of my daughter's laughter, to Noah's gentle touch as he pours coffee, to the warm snore of the baby curled up in my arms. And I wouldn't trade this life for anything. Noah once said, "Family isn't always something you're born into. Sometimes it's something you build." He was right. Our family was built from truth, from loss, from healing, from love. And in the end, this is the life I never expected, but the one I'm grateful for every single day. I lost everything when my world went silent. My body betrayed me. My husband abandoned me. But one voice, quiet, steady, cut through that darkness and reminded me I was still here, still worth holding on to. And that was enough to bring me back. This isn't just a story about betrayal or revenge. It's about how a person begins to come back to life when someone sees them at their weakest and chooses to stay. It's about second chances, about quiet kindness that never fades, about how just one person staying can change everything. Noah didn't save me with a miracle. He saved me with patience, with a love that didn't need a name, and that made me a better version of myself.